Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I stand before you to recount four chilling true tales, winter horror stories that reach deep inside your bones and refuse to let go. Stories so steeped in dread that even the howling wind knows to hush when their echoes drift across frozen landscapes. Each account carries with it the weight of real lives, of families torn apart, of steps lost in drifting snow, of hearts pounding with terror as breath turns to ice. And so I invite you now to walk with me into winter's darkest heart, where every flake of snow may conceal a tragedy, and every shadow beckons with creeping dread. Feel your pulse quicken, feel that tightening in your chest, for what you are about to hear is not fiction. It is lived horror, the kind's best told by trembling lips around a dim fire as night's cold breath presses against the window. The first story unfolds in the deep Canadian wilderness, where winter stretches on, endless and merciless. Imagine a man, call him Daniel, an experienced outdoorsman, a man who had trekked these woods in summer's warmth, paddled its rivers when they ran free, and yet this winter would swallow him whole. He set out one morning with his sled packed with supplies, confident in his skills, until the storm struck. He knew that blizzard was coming, but he underestimated its ferocity, its ravenous appetite. The drift rose too quickly, visibility vanished. White wall, white death, and Daniel found himself disoriented, one foot in front of the other, lungs burning, the sled behind him bobbing like a wounded creature. As hours dragged on into frozen hours, he realized something utterly terrifying. His compass was gone, lost in a gust of wind or perhaps buried beneath powder. Panic clawed up his throat as he spun in circles, each turn deeper into the forest, deeper into the unknown. His phone, his only link to rescue, had frozen, dead as the air around him. He couldn't call for help. He couldn't even know which direction was home, or farther from home. In the smothering white, he lost sense of time. He flagged down a tree to brace himself, but the white noise of the storm was deafening, drowning his cries for help before they left his lips. Panic turned to rage, and rage slipped into despair. As night fell, Daniel's world narrowed to breath, to cold, to hunger. He dug himself a makeshift snow shelter, heart trapped in frozen iron, waiting. Above him, snow fell, and with each soft, silent plume, he thought of home, and thought, too, that every flake might be his last. In the morning, rescuers found his imprint in the snow, a shivering impression, defined by panic and fading life. Daniel survived, but when he looked across that white horizon again, he saw not the forest he knew, but a vast, indifferent grave. The horror of being swallowed by winter, disoriented, helpless, not for minutes, but for endless, terrifying hours, still casts a long, cold shadow in his memory. In the next story, we travel to northern Scandinavia, where twilight remains permanent, and the cold is not a bite but a living entity wrapping tight around your throat. A family on vacation, mother, father, and daughter, drove through winding roads after dusk, making their way to a remote cabin. Snow lay thick on the road, headlights reflected back in shimmering sheets, and the wind moaned like the lost souls of winter's past. Suddenly, the car slid. There was a sharp snap, an axle broke, and the vehicle came to a jarring stop, perpendicular to the icy road, wheels spinning uselessly in white powder. The roads were deserted, the radio signal gone. Their phones showed signal bars dancing, taunting, vanishing. They huddled in the car, the cold creeping in through broken glass, through the jagged wound in the window. They tried to ration the little fuel they had to keep the heater ticking faintly, but the cold seeped in, slow and implacable, toppling layers of warmth like dominoes. At night, the silence was heavy. The daughter cried quietly, insomnia and fear mingling with every shudder of the car as the wind threw ice against metal. Hours passed. The father forced himself to drive into the night with a flashlight, hoping to see a distant glow of help, but the trees turned into an unbroken wall. He returned, empty-handed, to their frozen sanctuary. The header layer of snow trapped against the windshield became like thick ice all their hopes had long since frozen. The pressure of wanting to survive, wanting to reach for that last hope, only to feel it slipping away in every cold breath. They were adrift in isolation, vulnerable. Eventually they saw headlights. A stranger, a passing vehicle, shining through the storm. Rescue came, trembling fingers on that nearest hand, tears carving cold lines down faces, the sheer relief more haunting perhaps than the terror itself, because they knew how close they'd come to dying, together, in a car-turned tomb, in the merciless embrace of winter. Our third haunting true story takes place on a frozen river in the heart of New England, where ice is the precarious floor of hidden dangers. A man, John, decided to go ice fishing. He'd checked the ice the day before, found a promising stretch, and set his line where he'd done 1,000 times. Then came the thaw, a subtle thaw, but enough to weaken that icy floor. As he stepped onto the smooth surface the next morning, the ice cracked beneath his boots like a sinister promise. He saw the fracture, and just for a moment, a frozen heartbeat. He froze, terror blooming. Then the ice gave way, and the world inverted, cold water rising, lifting him, each breath slicing his lungs as he tried to kick upward. Panic drowned him, heavier than the freezing water. On the bank, his friend screamed and attempted to help, but the ice was fragile, untrustworthy, each step no less suicidal than plunging in. From the surface, John gasped, half drowned, half frozen, clinging to the broken fringe of ice. His friend rooted around for a branch, sliding inches closer with each slip, every second a test of will. John felt his mind fray at the edges as hypothermia crept in, stealing sensation from his limbs, flooding him with a creeping numbness that felt like death's invitation. He clawed and slashed at that fragile rim, each movement agony. Then, an awful stillness, a moment where he felt the ice loosen its hold entirely, except for that one final edge where he balanced between sinking and survival. At that moment, clarity. He would live or die by this frail bridge of ice, by pure desperation and strength he didn't know he possessed. The branch snapped, but he managed, by some last reserve of muscle, to haul himself onto the bank, collapsing into snow with that unforgettable gasp of life returning too quickly. The trauma didn't fade with him drying off and warming up. The river remained a venomous memory, a place of both literal and psychological cracks, an arena where thin, invisible wrong decisions turn fatal, where water that glitters peaceful on top may conceal a grave beneath. The fourth and final story, perhaps the most intimate, takes place not amid the wilderness, but inside a home, in a small rural town where snowdrifts pile at your doorstep and frost patterns trace artful designs on glass. A young woman, Sarah, lived alone in a modest house at the edge of town. One January night, she awoke to a soft clicking, a slow, rhythmic creak, like a weight being placed upon the front door. She assumed it was the wind, but as the noise repeated, the hair on her skin prickled, a warning too late to heed. She went to the window and peered out. The porch light was out, and the world was pitch black except for the snow falling like fine ash. Then, she saw it. Footprints leading across her porch, heading toward the window. Heavy, deliberate prints made by someone trudging through the drift. Panic swallowed her. She backed away, heart galloping, breath coming out in ragged clouds. She grabbed her cell phone, but the battery was at 1%, the charger nowhere in sight. She tried to call the police, but the signal was weak and flickered. Her legs wouldn't move. She was paralysis personified. The noise resumed, a composed, calm scratching at the window. Frozen fingers against glass. She could feel the breath. She raised herself to the sill and looked down. Nothing but snow. She exhaled, telling herself it was a deer. A branch caught outside, nothing more. It took 20 minutes to convince her she was alone, to chase away every imagined shadow. Then, just when she thought the terror had passed, the doorbell rang. She froze again. Who at midnight, in the dead, silent snow, would ring her bell? She didn't answer. The bell rang again, chilling her. Then the thud of something heavy thrown at the front door shattered glass, then pounding, slamming. She ran to the back of the house, lungs bursting, mind blur. Her phone lit up with a single bar of signal, and she dialed 911 with trembling fingers. She told the dispatcher what was happening, voice stiff with cold fear. The operator said help was on the way, but minutes crawled like hours. The pounding continued. In that time, in that still, suffocating semi-darkness, Sarah realized sheer terror is not just fear, but time slowed to hopeless extents when you beg for the clock to move, and it simply won't. Then sirens. Relief flooded her, a tidal wave that burned away numbness and replaced it with raw shaking. Police broke in, found signs of an intruder, footprints tracked away into the night, into the snowdrifts, and the world outside swallowed any trace of who was there, or if they were ever real. Sarah survived, but the lines between safety and vulnerability blurred forever, because that night taught her how easily a familiar home can become a horror framed in glass and footsteps, in breath on windows and unanswered doors. So here we stand, warmed by light, comforted by the solidity of walls, yet these stories have brought winter's true horror into the room, the white oblivion of storms, the insidious trap of ice, the isolation of malfunctioning technology, the violation of home. Each tale reminds us that beauty, snow's pristine hush, frozen landscapes, quiet nights, can conceal a sinister pulse beneath. These are not craftily fictional horrors. They are real horrors with real human hearts caught in winter's icy grip. Hold that beating heart now. Feel the weight of empathy for those who fought the unrelenting cold, who heard noises that froze their blood in place, who lost senses to hidden cracks in ice or drifting storms that remapped familiar terrain into a nightmare they couldn't escape. Winter's cruelty is not polite. She is silent, patient, and wholly real. We tell these stories to remember that terror need not be painted in gore or grotesque detail to unnerve us. The calm slide of a car into snow, the muted snap of ice, those are horror's tools, subtle and intimate. Real horror doesn't need howls. It needs a heartbeat, it needs breath, and it needs the quiet moment when every person realizes they are entirely, terrifyingly alone against the indifferent cold, or alone with something waiting at their window, brushing fingertips on the glass. Let these stories echo in your memory. Let them dim your certainty when you drive through dusk into winter night. Let them make the hush of falling snow feel less peaceful, because peace can pave the way for something far darker. And when next you feel cold seep into your bones, remember Daniel, stranded in white death, that family trapped in their car, freezing together as storm claimed the outside, John, inches from a freezing river's trap, Sarah, hearing breath against her window and finding not reassurance, but the raw terror of intrusion. Let empathy and a trembling respect guide your reflection, glowing quietly as the longest winter night rages outside, and let the memory of each haunting moment linger as sharply as frost, leaving a trace you cannot forget.